Folks, another week has come to a near end, almost over. We can celebrate early because it's Freaky Friday on the Podcast Daily. We wanted your questions and you delivered on subtext. Bill Landis, me, Austin Ward, we're here. We've got I assume it's a bursting digital mailbag, Bill.
It always is. We always get a lot of questions. And we did receive a question, not for this show, but I don't know, like a week ago maybe that I saw, and I apologize, I can't remember who it was from, but it was like, I wonder how upset people get when they send in questions and they don't get answered on the show. It's like the podcast would be 2 hours long if we did that. And while Doug and I do sometimes do 2-hour podcasts, like I don't think people want those regularly. So that's part of the reason why we don't get to every single question, but we always appreciate people sending them in. And also some of them are duplicative, right? So if you send in a question on one subject and we happen to take someone else's question on the same subject, like we are still answering your question, but we apologize for not saying your name and reading your question. Sorry, we do all of them. Yeah,
we do. Sometimes I get like, there's been Road Beers episodes where Berm will just dive into the YouTube comments, and I'm like, "Hey, man, I got 20 questions from subtext over here. I already planned it out. How long are we going to do this show?" And he's just like, whatever.
Just as long as there's still beer. Yeah,
as long as there's still beer. Maybe that's what we should be doing to start a Friday morning. If we'll just crack some beers, and then we can live stream all morning long.
There could be beer in here. You don't know. You don't know what's in here.
Oh, that's true. I don't know. Yeah. I'd love to find out.
Could be anything.
Yeah. These questions could be anything because, again, you didn't share them with me, and I did peek into the inbox to find out. I wanted to come in fresh, clean slate, and figure out what's on the people's minds.
I think you'll be okay. There's one that will require you to maybe rack your brain a little bit, but otherwise, I think you'll be okay answering these off the cuff. So we'll start with this. We got a few different versions of this question. It was like probably the newsiest thing to happen during the week, and that was Ohio State recruiting. Well, I guess like she was an assistant AD, but ran on-campus recruiting. Aaron Dunston leaving Ohio State to go to Michigan to be the director of operations up there for Sharon Moore. So this was the second loss to Michigan in terms of staff this offseason. So I picked Thomas's question, but there were a bunch of people who were asking basically the same thing. What is the impact of Aaron Dunstan's, he said defection, I'll just say decision to, advance her career and go to Michigan? Does she know anything that the cheaters up north can use against us? Does her leaving cost us any recruits? Is there any reason to worry?
It is amusing to put it purely in sports terms, a defection to the enemy, when it's not really the reality for an adult in her position making a career decision. She gave a lot to Ohio State, but she did not go to Ohio State. She worked at LSU before she got here. So, she had done good work, and that's why Ohio State sought her out as well. She did a fantastic job for the Buckeyes, and she certainly is going to be well aware of the way the recruiting machine works for the Buckeyes. She's going to be difficult to replace. Impossible to replace? No, I don't think so. I don't mean that in any way as a slight on her. As I said, she's done a fantastic job, and that's why other places wanted to hire her away. But there are more people in that profession that can be brought in to do that. They will have big shoes to fill. There will be insight, I think, that Michigan will learn from her and probably enhance the way they do things. Is Michigan set up in the exact same way to operate as Ohio State? No, I don't think that they are. So they hired a good person. It will upgrade their program. I don't think, even if it is a nuisance for Ohio State to have to replace her in the summer, that it is going to break the wheel and force them to rethink the way they do business. I don't want to gloss over it in either way. I want to pay the proper respect to Aaron Dunston for what she's done in her career, and she's earned the opportunity to do whatever she wants, while also suggesting that this particular spot in the personnel department will have just about everyone in the country fighting over it. And what Aaron Dunston is doing at Michigan as in football operation would not be the exact same thing that she was doing for Ohio State in the recruiting department. So in some ways, it's hard to know exactly what that means for Michigan in the next evolution of her career. But we do know what Ohio State will be looking for in terms of replacing her.
Another common question was why is Ryan Day letting his people go to Michigan? Which is like probably not an accurate depiction of the situation, right?
Well, Bill, I
and
saw people on the Michigan message boards wondering if like Tony Alford was sent there to sabotage the program since he hasn't won any recruiting battles.
He has not won any recruiting battles. Yeah, I'm not sure Michigan fans are all that happy with Ryan Day letting Tony Alford go to Michigan right now. Maybe that'll work out better for Ohio State than it does Michigan. They are very different situations, I think. Right, like Aaron Dunston is taking a job in football operations, and Ohio State has a director of football operations, right? Like that position was not available for her at Ohio State. It is available at Michigan, which is a very good football program. I think a lot of people would have taken that job because like a lot of people reasonably like to advance their careers. Tony Alford going is different, right? Like there was, I don't know maybe you should describe it better than me. Like there was at least the thought prior to Tony Alford going to Michigan that maybe the relationship between Tony Alford and the program had sort of run its course a little bit, right? And maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if both parties went kind of their separate ways. But then, like, it didn't happen, and we were all expecting Tony Alford to be the running backs coach this fall, and then that separation does happen at like a weird time, and he ends up going to Michigan. Like that, I don't think like Tony Alford was like calculated in his decision to go to Michigan, but I do think that there was like an underlayer there that certainly I think does not exist with the Aaron Dunston move to Michigan.
Yeah, I use this. It's not a perfect hypothesis by any stretch of the imagination, but I think regular listeners of the podcast today will know that I think that coaches and programs need a fresh start every 7 or 8 years. Like you can get stale and conservative or however you want to describe it, set in your ways, complacent, all these things. I think pick one of them. They're all true. That can apply to a position coaches as well. Like I think that Tony Alford had done a good job for Ohio State. I made that point numerous times. It wouldn't have felt like a blow to the Buckeyes if he hadn't done a good job coaching running backs and getting the most out of J.K. Dobbins and developing guys and building a room that had Chip Trayanum and Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson all in it at the same time a year ago. Like it stung because he had done a good job, but the knock that had been attached to him was that he wasn't winning some of these high profile recruiting battles anymore, or not all of them, not all the ones that Ohio State wanted to win. And I think, some of that could come from a little bit of being set in his ways, and Tony Alford, as much as Ohio State did, could benefit from a new voice coming into the room. And we've seen good results for Carlos Lachlan already with the Buckeyes as they've turned the page to this new era. Tony Alford's decision was going to have a much more direct result to the on-field product than Aaron Dunston's. And again, that's not to diminish her importance to what she did for the Buckeyes, because recruiting is the lifeblood of every program, and she was intimately involved in that. But in the same way that Ryan Day was going to be more important than Tony Alford, Mark Pantoni is always going to be more important than Aaron Dunston. So that's a fact of life. And if Aaron Dunston was going to find that next opportunity and wanted to advance her career, she was going to have to do that elsewhere.
Yeah, to answer the question more directly, like, no, I don't think Ohio State is in danger of like losing any recruits because of this. It's not the best timing, right? They had another official visit weekend coming up, and I'm sure the logistics of that are a little bit of a headache now without the on-campus recruiting director. But as we record this now, everyone who was supposed to come is coming, and I think Ohio State will get through the weekend just fine. It's just, again, it's a similar to Tony Alford. It's a matter of bad timing, I think, but I think this is far more navigable for Ohio State, and I'm sure they'll be just fine on the other side of it. So,
yeah, I've never. We'll ask Berm this, and maybe we'll talk about it on Monday at Roosters. But like, I don't remember any recruit ever saying they were picking Ohio State because of the on-campus recruiting director.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds like I don't mean it as a slight to anyone who works in the recruiting department, but the position coaches and the head coach are about it. They might earn a mention. They might do a really good job, and they do an important job, but the one usually what you're ultimately deciding on, Tony Alford in that way was more likely to have an impact on running back recruiting and the success of that than Aaron Dunston. That's again just the way that the structure works.
Yeah, and one other thing before we move on to the next question. I wrote a story when I was at The Athletic. I think it was my first story I wrote for The Athletic about the Mark Pantoni tree, and like how like we talk about coaching trees all the time. But like Mark Pantoni actually has a pretty impressive run of people who have worked for him going off to like kind of do their own thing. And this is not exactly like Aaron Dunston's not leaving to go run the Michigan recruiting department, although one day maybe she will. But this is like another one of like Mark Pantoni's quote unquote assistants who is going on to like bigger and better things. And like that sort of comes with the territory too. There are a lot of people across college football running their own recruiting departments who used to work at Ohio State, who understand the secrets of Ohio State's sauce, I guess. But that's I don't think it's been to the detriment of Ohio State, and I'm not necessarily convinced that this will be either. Here is the next question from Ezra. This is a little bit of a thinker because, like, I think knowing what we know now, the answer is probably pretty obvious. But maybe we can like twist it a little bit. So his question is: if you had to pick between this quarterback room, 5 guys you think can play at Ohio State, but no surefire superstar for 2024, or the 2019 quarterback room, Justin Fields and transfers who were basically graduate assistants, which is a fun way to describe it because it's partly true. Who do you pick? He says, personally, I take Fields because I think Fields on this team is an odds-on national champ favorite, but it's always scary when one play can end your season. So I wonder if this isn't quite as obvious as I think it is. So what do you think of this question? And like, when I thought about it, I tried to think about it like pretending I didn't know what Justin Fields became. Like I tried to put myself in the shoes of Bill Landis in 2019, when like all I knew is that Justin Fields was like a former 5-star prospect who had a hard time getting on the field at Georgia and was like a relative unknown at the time. And I think if you think about it that way, you probably can convince yourself that on some level this year's quarterback room I think is more desirable.
Boy, it's tough to think about that without remembering what Justin Fields would become. And even before he arrived, it felt like he had been so mismanaged at Georgia that it didn't even really matter. Like that he had struggled to get on the field. Like Georgia seemed to have no idea what to do with him. They were in the midst of that like puzzling stretch of let's put him out there to run a fake punt. Like that was the sort of stuff. Like I think that they knew how talented and athletic he was. They just had no real ability to incorporate him into their offense. And like Ohio State was not going to have that issue. But if the question is like, would you rather have 5 or 1? And I think the answer should always be 5 over 1, even if the 1 is as incredibly talented as Justin Fields. I think I slipped into say 1 because that's what I want the answer to be. Like you want to watch Justin Fields. It was a Freudian slip, Freudian Freaky Friday slip to say, take the more talented player over the depth of the room. But I think especially with 14 in the back of your mind for Ohio State, like having a more deep talent, more depth of talent in your room over the course of 16 or 17 games is more important than it has ever been. And it's always been important in college football. I don't think you want to be in a spot where you, like, in some ways, Justin Fields wasn't allowed to be Justin Fields because you couldn't run him. You couldn't risk the injury. When we talked about CJ Stroud not being a running back and not running for first downs, like, Ohio State still was in a spot where it didn't want to risk losing the starting quarterback. If what we talked about on Thursday is true, that they want and need to run the quarterback more, if not fully to a JT Barrett level, you have less fear of that when you have Will Howard, Devin Brown, and Lincoln Kienholz, all 3 of those at the top of your depth chart.
Yeah, I think that's right. I would probably, again, if I'm using my scenario, not the scenario where we all know how good Justin Fields was, I would probably take this current room because you have Will Howard, right, who I think is at worst like an above average college starter, but also stands to be much better than that with Ohio State talent around him. And then you also have like the allure of the Julian Say and Aaron Nolan combo too, like in the future, which like Ohio State didn't have in 2019. It was like we have Justin Fields, and then we know we got him for 2 years, and we have no idea what it's going to look like beyond that. And thankfully, CJ Stroud kind of fell out of the sky, and Ohio State ended up getting a really good successor to Justin Fields. But like present and future, this is like a little more palatable, I think. But I like absolutely, if you want to say like, no, give me Justin Fields, give me the upside. I wouldn't push back on that. I think that's also a reasonable take, but depth, present, future, I kind of like how the 2024 quarterback room stacks up.
Yeah, I mean, I just think you feel more secure about the long haul floor of your team when you have more than one. And like clearly Justin Fields elevates the ceiling. This particular team, I guess under the scope of, would you rather have Justin Fields, 2019 Justin Fields, put him right now on 2024 Ohio State? And you say, well, absolutely, sign me up for that. That team will not be ever beat. Well, injuries do happen. They happened to Justin Fields on the way to in a playoff race because he was running and got hit in the back against Clemson. It's through no fault of his own. Like it is hard to stay that healthy over the course of a year. So in a 1-game sample size, you're taking Justin Fields without question. In that Ohio State version, I don't know how you would ever stop it. But if you're building something for 16 games, I think you would have to sacrifice a bit of the ceiling to ensure that you can get through the year because everything else is already in place for this team.
Speaking of really good players, Charles wants to know,
okay,
who is the best player that Ohio State will play in the regular season? He said, explain your answer, as if we wouldn't do that. He said, just to make it interesting, you can't pick the Akron quarterback.
What? We don't even know. We still don't even know who Akron's quarterback is. So how could we do that?
No idea. We did a whole bit on it, and I can't remember anything we talked about. No idea who Akron's quarterback is. But do you have a thought on who the best player Ohio State will play against this year might be?
I still think it would probably be the defensive tackle tandem for Michigan. Like, I think those guys are really good. Maybe at this time a year ago, I was not paying enough attention to how good they were. They wreck things. They're going to be even still, like if we're talking about most important matchups for Ohio State this year, and we don't know definitively what's going to happen at right guard, to a lesser extent center, we think we know what's going to happen there. Like, they're going to have to handle that. Like, I think I have a lot of uncertainty about what the rest of Michigan looks like, particularly on offense, but no question that those dudes are legit up front. So you do a lot more of like going through roster by roster across the North with Doug. So I'm certain that you have more answers readily available at your fingertips than me. But like, I don't know. I think that I think Katron Allen and Nick Singleton are very good players. I don't know that they're at a level that would change my thinking about that matchup with Penn State late in the middle of season. But you do have to start game plan and start thinking about handling Michigan's defensive line in the summer, I think. And that's the highest praise I think I could give them.
Yeah, I think most people's minds will probably go right to Michigan and probably go right to Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, or Will Johnson. Like, Will Johnson, I think, has an opportunity to be the best corner in college football this year. I'm not saying he will be, but he'll be in that conversation, and he'll be a very high draft pick after this season. So he's definitely on that list too. If I could throw out like one non-Michigan guy, I would probably say Abdul Carter at Penn State, who is moving from linebacker to defensive end. They're basically doing with him what they never did, but definitely should have done with Micah Parsons, which is realizing that he should be rushing after the quarterback on every snap. So they're moving him from linebacker to defensive end. I'm sure he'll still do some linebacker stuff, but it sounds like they're going to move him around a lot. And I think I said on Kings of the North that I think he might end up leading the country in sacks because I just think he's that good of a pass rusher. He was a kid who camped at Ohio State. I guess it was 2 summers ago now. And like, I was talking with his dad a little bit because he's from Philly and his dad actually went to the same high school as me. And I really thought Ohio State was going to offer him, and they never did. And maybe it was partly because he kind of looked okay as a linebacker, and maybe they didn't see the edge rushing potential. But Penn State has seen it now, and they're going to put him there. So I think he will be the guy who could end up being like the most difficult person to deal with for Ohio State's offensive line this fall. But I say that, and I think there's been a lot of seasons where we've said that about Penn State pass rushers, and it always hasn't always come to fruition. In fact, it very rarely has when they play Ohio State. So maybe that'll be sort of an unfounded fear. But going into the season, I think Abdul Carter stands a reasonable chance of being the best player Ohio State faces this year.
I know that once we get to the second week in October, there's going to be a ton of this conversation about like Dylan Gabriel, like this is the chance. He will have some element, I think, of Heisman Trophy campaign based on their schedule going into that game as well, and what the stakes are going to be. So in some ways, it feels like a cop out to just name, really key players on the three best teams that Ohio State plays. Like there's probably going to be at some point someone who elevates and does get drafted between any of the people that we named, but
sure,
the rest of the people that we might talk about don't have good enough teammates to really, I think, pose Ohio State a threat.
Yeah, there will be somebody who emerges. I think the most interesting player Ohio State is going to face this year is Dylan Raiola, but that wasn't the question. The question was best. But like Dylan Raiola coming to the shoe is going to be pretty sweet.
Are they? Are they treating him as the starter coming out of spring? Is that what's going on there?
I don't know that he has been officially named the starter yet, but yeah, I don't think anyone in Lincoln or any Nebraska fan is expecting any other outcome other than Dylan Raiola being that team starting quarterback this fall.
That seems like it's going to be a real bad day for him.
It could be. It could very much be. Yeah.
Okay.
Here is a question that I don't have a great answer to, but I know you golf a lot, so I wondered maybe if you had one.
Okay.
This is from Adam. It's not a golf question necessarily, but golfers seem rather superstitious to me. So Adam's question is, what is a silly sport or non-sport superstition that you have? And he shared his. He says, every year since 2015, I buy a new OSU shirt to wear for every game until they lose, thinking it'll be good luck when they win the national championship. And this clearly hasn't worked. And he just ordered his 2024 shirt and it arrived the other day. So do you have any sport or non-sport superstitions or anything like you do when you're playing golf that like you must do every time you play golf?
I used to when I was younger and took it much more seriously than I do now. But that didn't work. I didn't become a pro. So I just stopped doing that and started drinking more on the course. It's hard to like, not really. As the older I've gotten, now I am a creature of habit, and so for a long time, and then as you got into the fold with Berm and I over the last several years to see what it was like when we were on the road, I'm sure some of those things were like, man, these guys are eating way too much Jimmy John's. Like, why are they eating these freaky fast sandwiches all the time? And it just, we are creatures of habit. And maybe Berm would say that is more of a superstition. And if we didn't have that as a nearby pregame meal before going to work, maybe that would be a bad day for us, whether that was an outcome or my laptop breaking or something. I don't know, but we would clearly, Ohio State road game coverage for us involves road beers on Friday night. So I have to have that no matter what. I must seek out local craft beer, and I would like to drink it at the place that brewed it. Now we have gotten away. I think a couple people have noticed that maybe I don't eat as much Jimmy John's now as I did 6 months ago. And so like we did not do that in the second half of last season. So maybe the loss to Michigan or the disaster in the Cotton Bowl, maybe those things were my fault. But and I'll have to, self-reflect about my choices in the outcome for the Buckeyes. But we'll just make, as long as we have Friday nights the same, I feel like I'm doing my part.
Is it always the same order at Jimmy John's?
For Berm, it is. He orders the same thing every time. I would alternate between the Italian nightclub and the spicy Italian. And I would also rotate between salt and vinegar chips and jalapeno chips. I'm okay with a little bit of variety there. I can assure you that is not the case for Jeremy Birmingham, who ordered that again during camp season on Tuesday night at my house. So he's already doing the preseason work to get there.
I don't know that I have any superstitions now. Like in my sports fandom, I will catalog what I'm wearing in case something good happens, and then like keep wearing it, I guess, until whatever that streak is tends to end. But I don't go in like to a season with like my lucky shirt or whatever, or lucky socks or whatever that is. When I played sports, I guess the closest thing I had to it was like before every baseball season, I would like I would just find a rubber band, whether in school or like around my house or whatever, and I'd wear it on my wrist, and I would like put little like tick marks on it every time I got a hit, just like keep track of how many hits I had that year. But also like I felt like I needed that on my wrist throughout the entire baseball season, or else I wasn't going to be able to hit anything. And some years there were more tick marks on that wrist, on that rubber band than others. We don't have to talk about how good or bad of a hitter I was, but
we should.
Yeah. I was boom or bust. I was slow, shockingly. I was very
little
slow.
Adam Dunn action.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't strike out a lot, to be honest. But you were either like getting a single or a homer out of me. And the hard part with that is a lot of the fields that we played on in Philadelphia like didn't have home run fences. So if you wanted to hit a home run, you had to earn it, you had to run for it. And I wasn't doing a whole lot of that. So when I did get on fields that had home run fences, I fared pretty well. But otherwise, yeah, you were just getting a lot of long singles out of me, unfortunately.
Well, that happens. That's an interesting one. Maybe I need more superstitions. Maybe that'll help.
Listen, you can start one up right now if you want to.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I don't know. I'll have to think about it.
Okay. Should we get back to a football question?
I guess so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. This one is, we have 3 more questions left.
Okay. 2
are football.
And then the other question is about Clash at the Castle.
Oh, it's actually not, but we can talk about that at the end too. This question is from Paul. It's a Chip Kelly question.
Okay.
What do you think is most important with having Chip Kelly around? And he lists 4 things. Innovating the run game with more diversity, calling plays on game days, letting Ryan Day step out of the offensive meeting room to handle head coach duties, or mentoring the other offensive coaches to perhaps be the OC whenever Chip leaves. Which of those 4 would you say is maybe most important with Chip here?
Innovating the run game, I think, is most important. I actually think there's a world where I already know that people aren't going to like this, where Chip Kelly's arrival could have allowed Ryan Day to keep calling plays. I don't think that he should. I don't think that he will. But like the actual game planning influence that I think Chip Kelly is going to have would maybe better position Ryan Day to call plays. But the same things always apply that we have talked about. He needs to be able to have a better maybe understanding of the feel of the game, decisions for offense, defense, when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive. I do think that some of that for him has come at the expense of an incredible attention to detail on offense because he's the play caller. So I'm not advocating that change. I'm just saying that Chip Kelly's Sunday through Friday work, especially as it relates to the run game, probably positions the entire rest of the staff in a better way than they have been aligned in the last several years.
I agree with that. Actually, I get what you're saying about the Ryan Day calling plays thing, right? Like I think it's probably better for everybody that he's not, right? Like the new college football rule, all the stuff we've talked about. I think it's probably necessary for him to take a step away from that, but it's not like it's been bad, right? Like if Ryan Day were calling plays this year and Chip Kelly were around, like I still think Ohio State would win the national championship, right? So, but I do think it is making this run game something far better than it's been the last couple of years, and it's quasi interesting to me that like it's Ryan Day's mentor, both like in life and like schematically in football, that will be the person who does that, when in theory, I guess Ryan Day could have done that at any other time prior to Chip Kelly being his offensive coordinator. But regardless, I do think that's going to happen now. I am getting a little nervous about my prediction for Ohio State leading the Power 5 in rushing as I've like looked at some other rosters and what they have, just because like I think there are a couple of teams out there with like good running back tandems, not as good as Ohio State's, but also quarterbacks that they're just going to run a lot more than even if Ohio State does run the quarterback more. Like there are teams that are going to like major in that. I think I'm mostly thinking of UCF. Like I think UCF might run for a bunch of yards this year. But anyway, Ohio State is still going to, I think, have a vastly improved rushing offense. And I think it won't all be Chip Kelly, right? Because he's not running the ball. Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson are, and that's probably a bigger part of it. But innovating the run game, I think, is the most important thing Chip Kelly will do here. And the 2 and 3 there from the question probably go hand in hand, right? Like calling plays and freeing up Ryan Day are like kind of the same thing. Those are also very important. But I would still put the run game design higher up on the list, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that once they get to August 1st, that Ryan Day is going to be missing a lot of offensive meetings. Personally, maybe I'll be wrong about that. I do believe that he will make more media appearances. He's doing the luncheon on August 1st as part of having fans out for the first of 4 practices, which twice as many of them are going to be open in training camp this year as compared to last year. Those are things that aren't going to be like a tremendous burden on his time. And he has a finite amount available that is still going to primarily be from August 1st until the 3rd week in January about winning football games. And he's best at being involved on the offense. And I'm not sure what he really would bring to a defensive meeting. Although I know he wants to be involved with that. So he's going to put the game plan in place with Chip Kelly. It's not going to be a one-man show, and he's not going to take his hands entirely off the wheel, even if he turns off his headset on Saturdays in a way that he hasn't previously.
I think, I think the game day operation will be a little different, but the game planning, I don't think will be drastically different. It just does give Ryan Day the freedom to leave like when he has to, which he hasn't always had. But I don't know how often that happens during the season. It's incredibly important, I think, this time of year. I think it'll be incredibly important in December when Ohio State's getting ready to play playoff games, but Ryan Day's got to call 15 recruits because they still have the early signing period. The week after, I think, the Big Ten championship. Or maybe it's the week of the Big Ten championship. So, like, while that stuff's happening, that's when Chip Kelly maybe, like, really earns his paycheck aside from the run game stuff. But Ryan Day will very much have his hands on what this offense does. That definitely isn't changing.
Right.
All right, here's the non-football question. Eric would like for us to rate our top 3 sitcoms. His are The Big Bang Theory, The Office, and Everybody Loves Raymond, which he put in parentheses, underrated.
Underrated on Everybody Loves Raymond.
Yeah.
I'll have to take his word on that. I think I probably only ever saw like 2 episodes of that show, and they were on an airplane, so I might have been missing most of it. Okay, good question. I don't think we've ever done this on any road beers or anything else. My number 1, without a doubt, hands down, favorite sitcom of all time is Community. I mentioned that to you. Maybe we were just talking in the Woody 6 or 7 months ago, and Berman are like, "You've never seen Community?" And you're like, "Nope, sorry." I'm like, "Well, please eventually correct this." And I don't know if you have, but you should. And if you don't, that's okay. I'll still be your friend. But it is so phenomenal. I've probably been through that show 20 times with Allie, and it just gets better every time. Second is The Office. I agree there. That's the right spot. And my third favorite sitcom of all time was another originally BBC sitcom. The American version failed miserably and was not even close to what made it great. And the BBC version, for those that don't know, The Office started over there. A show in the, early 2000s. I can't remember exactly when it came out. Lasted for 4 seasons, and British seasons are much shorter. But Coupling is just one of the most hilarious shows of all time. And I used to describe it to people as like a mix between Friends and Seinfeld, but that's really undershooting the mark for what it is, because it's like most of it is in a bar and these couples, having drinks and then dealing with like progressively more adult situations as they go along, and like not just resetting as a sitcom traditionally does. Like whatever happened in the previous one, it doesn't matter. They're going back and it's the problem of the week, and nobody ever grows or gets better or ages or has a child. And that's not the case for coupling. So I really love that. I think anyone who's ever watched it probably knows where I'm coming from on that one. It's maybe not as many people as it used to be when I would have the DVDs with me in college and turn somebody new onto it every couple months and then zip through another season. It's been a long time since I've watched it through, but it's number 3 for me. A long-winded way of me saying Community, The Office, and coupling.
I've never heard of coupling. It makes me want to watch it now or go seek it out. I have not dove into Community just yet, but I really want to, because I know you guys love it. My brothers actually love it. They've watched all of it too. They would probably say the Community is their favorite show if they were asked this question. So I do need to watch it. My number 1 is The Office. I've probably seen every episode of The Office at least 20 times. Number 2 for me actually is like Parks and Rec, like not to just like stay in one lane, but Parks and Rec is number 2 for me. And then number 3, I was torn. I've lost touch with It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia like the last few years, but when it first started, and probably for the first, 10 years or so, I think the show's been on for like 16 years or something like that now. That was definitely one that like, I don't know. I'll stop and watch it whenever I come across it. There was like a nostalgic one for me too, which was Boy Meets World, which I realize is like not like a classic sitcom. That's more of like just what I watched when I was a kid. But I've definitely seen every episode of it multiple times. So I like that one too. But it's more of a big 2 for me with The Office and Parks and Rec.
I have a question for you then.
Mm-hmm.
Topanga Lawrence or Kelly Kapowski?
I didn't watch like Saved by the Bell, so yeah, I was team Topanga. Young Bill was team Topanga all the way.
Okay,
yeah,
I think old Bill's still team Topanga.
Danielle Fishel, who the actress who plays Topanga, who I think is probably a little bit older than I am. Randomly, like you would have to know where I grew up to understand how random this is, but there's like a really crappy corner bar like 2 blocks from the house that I grew up called McGeehan's. It's like literally someone's basement that became a bar, and like she was there one night. I don't know how it happened or how she found herself in that bar, but she was there, and from what I heard, she got pretty tuned up. So good for her for having a good time at McGeehan's in Northeast Philadelphia.
So she's legit Philly.
She's not from Philly.
I know, but she was in town. I want to say maybe they were doing like a reunion, or like maybe like they did like they do like a Boy Meets World podcast now. So maybe they were doing like a live show in Philly or something. I can't recall why she was there. This was a couple years ago, but she was definitely like in the crappy dive bar in my neighborhood, which makes absolutely no sense for anyone of any notoriety to ever be there. But she was there. So we appreciate that about her. Respect.
Yeah.
You got any surprises on Saturday in Scotland?
I think Drew McIntyre is going to win.
Okay.
I don't know if that qualifies as a surprise, but I think he's going to win.
I think he should win, but I don't think he's going to, because I think that chest muscles Punk is going to pop out of the woodwork and cost Drew the title again. I think he's going to be in position to win, and Scotland is going to be hot and in his corner for it. But it won't even be, because Judgment Day is now banned from ringside, and we know that those bans are permanent and unstoppable. So if, in fact, the Dirty Dom and JD McDonough can't get down there, and Carlito, I guess, is not technically in the Judgment Day, so there's another loophole for them. But if they don't come down, someone's going to have to help Damian retain, and that person, I think, will be CM Punk.
Yeah, that's probably right, because it feels like Drew and CM Punk is a SummerSlam match, right? And I guess like I guess it could just be a match for the title, but Punk hasn't really earned that yet. So, and I don't think Punk would be back in time to win like Money in the Bank and challenge Drew at SummerSlam, or try to cash in on Drew at SummerSlam. So, Yeah, you're probably right. Then otherwise, like I don't know. Like Cody's not going to lose.
No.
I don't think Sami Zayn's going to lose. So I don't. I feel like one of the titles has to change hands, right? They're not just going to have chalk across the board at a PLE. I don't know. Women's tag titles, maybe.
I can't see how they could lose to either of those two teams. It'd be like no build for Alba Fire or Isla Dawn, and Shayna Baszler just lost an NXT match last weekend, so I'm not sure how I'm supposed to take them seriously. There doesn't have to be, but I mean, if they want a feel good moment, that promo from Piper Niven last week was pure fire. Like, have her take down Bayley in Scotland, give them that moment. I don't. Bayley has done nothing with the strap since she got it, and I'm not sure what they're even trying to do with her. So why not just give Piper a little achievement at home?
I don't think the reaction to Bayley winning has been what WWE thought it was going to be. So if that's the case, then yeah, why not have Piper Niven win it there?
We were there when it happened. It still was like, okay.
Yeah.
Good job, Bayley. Like, yeah,
it was fine.
Even from the moment they did it, it's been underwhelming.
Yeah. So I think that could be one, and that could be cool. I like Piper Niven. I actually think she's better than she gets credit for. So I'd be okay with that.
And if Chelsea Green just becomes more of her manager, I think people, I don't know. I thought that Chelsea was talking because Piper couldn't get out a promo, and that turned out to very much not be the case. But if you have like, heelish cheating Chelsea Green working with Piper Niven, I think you can make some money off of that.
Yeah. Oh my, yeah. It's like a manager almost, right? Yeah.
Well, you've reached the end of the mailbag where Bill and I start talking about wrestling. Berm encouraged this, so you can blame him and just be thankful, I guess, if you don't like it, that the whole show, we don't have a whole show dedicated to previewing premium live events, which again, that's Saturday, 2:00 Eastern time, Clash at the Castle. You don't want to miss it. If you don't want to watch it, of course, our attention will also be on Pinehurst #2, US Open. Going to be a great sports weekend. Looks like fantastic weather in Columbus, so take advantage of that. And Bill, happy Father's Day to you. This is
likewise.
your second one, right? Yeah. Is that how that works?
Is
that how calendars work?
That's right. This is my second one, and me and the boy are going to be alone for this one because my wife has to go out of town. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, I see a trip to Grove City is also in your future. You've earned it. Head down to
can I do a plug that Peacock has not paid for, but I do think maybe it would be of interest to Ohio State fans.
Absolutely.
While we're talking PLEs and US Open, which is also on Peacock this week, you can currently get Peacock for $20 for the whole year. So like if you want to watch Ohio State basketball or football more specifically play on Peacock and you don't have it, it is available for $20 for the entire year right now.
That's a lot of streaming on the cock right there.
That's right.
And The Office is there, and probably and Parks and Recreation.
Yeah,
all of Bill's favorites are available right there. And the check, I'm sure, is in the mail. Even if he didn't do it in advance, they're going to retroactively pay him for the plug. That's how all of that works, I'm sure. Hey, we hope you have a fantastic weekend. We thank you if you made it this far on a Freaky Friday edition, a mailbag edition of the Podcast Daily. We'll be back again on Monday. A few more camps coming. We'll get into that, and we'll be back at Roosters, and we will talk to you then.